Welcome to Politics and Psychology. Today we are discussing all the king's men. With the presidential re-election of Donald Trump, many individual CEOs, politicians, and corporations have preemptively followed his directives, met his demands, and made clear their commitment to him. Through making public statements, to the changing of corporate policies, to the giving Trump, his family, and his businesses millions of dollars, these individuals have pronounced and sealed themselves as supportive of and loyal to Donald Trump. So when you consider that Donald Trump is not even the president yet, it's the actions of these individuals that reveals a lot about their inner thoughts, so their psychological processes. It lets us know about their self-esteem, their integrity, and not only their ambitions, but also their motivations. And these actions and mindsets also reveal their social dominance rank, or being a beta male or a beta ranking. So you have like an alpha male, a beta male. I know all the kids now are saying sigma, but this is for psychological proof. So it shows us that if they exhibit these behaviors, that they're also engaging and revealing their perceptions of, or their actual social dominance rank of being not the alpha male or the alpha in the group, but actually being more of a beta ranking. It also reveals their lower levels of social rank and their levels of submissive social behaviors. Now, many of the individuals that we will review today are males. So when you look at male psychology and social behavior, it's males who are more likely than females to readily group themselves according to hierarchy and establish a clear overall leader, as well as recognize lower ranking leaders. So you can still be an alpha male or an alpha personality and still work under or work for an alpha leader or even a beta leader, but they just happen to have the position. So just because your position in your career or military or social ranking, you may not be the top alpha, it does not mean that there's only one alpha in the group, unless, of course, you're a wolf. But the most successful male productivity groups usually have just one alpha male and then divided into lower subgroups of lower ranking alpha males. So just think of football. Males are quick to assemble and respect the position of the leaders, the alphas, who would be the quarterback or the coach, and they accept this without any act of submission. It's just what they also do in the workplace. So they're accepting the role, but not the submission if they are alpha males. But in contrast, for female psychology, females reveal that a hierarchy approach is the least preferred. So they don't want anyone to stand out. Instead, females are more likely to value sameness, with no female having a higher standing over the other females. If there is a higher standing female, then the value of that female is one of a nurturing leader role. And this does not mean, so don't mistake me to be saying that females are not very ambitious or aggressive, or that they do not value competition. But when you look at social behavior, then it just means that when females who are in a female-only group, they less emphasize hierarchy, and they more emphasize or highly value collaboration. And they also are more likely to seek input, in contrast to male leaders who are more likely to seek domination. So that would be the difference. But also, the more testosterone a female has, then that will mean that she will also have more of a need for social domination, and she will also be more likely to be aggressive in pursuing her own ambition and domination over others. So as a female's testosterone levels are higher, or if a female has higher testosterone than the other females in that female-only group, then most likely she will exert herself as the leader, and she will pursue domination and ambition if it's a very high testosterone level. But the same is also true for men. The less testosterone a man has, the more likely he will submit to the alpha male in the group, as well as other lower ranking alpha males. When you examine this from a life purpose point of view, In life, there does have to be leaders and there has to be followers. So if your personality, your interest, your testosterone level, your skills, and your ambition levels, all of those are set for a certain reason to accomplish whatever your life purpose is, and also helps you to clarify more accurately what that career path is to follow and to better recognize your calling and your purpose. So, if you know that you are a very extroverted alpha male person, then you're most likely not going to do well being the lower ranking accountant who sits in the basement all day. So, just basically don't assume that because a person has low or high levels of testosterone or because they do not have alpha type personality characteristics that they are less valued or that they are weak. It just helps us better understand that there are biological bases of behavior as well as workplace and career choices. But back to the main point. So when we apply hierarchy needs and social rankings to this recent behavioral and verbal response to Trump's re-election, we see very powerful men become very eager to submit to Trump. Likewise, we've seen women who are in power who were previously opposed to Trump now quickly change their minds, even if it meant sacrificing the needs and interests of their own special interest groups. So, who are some of these individuals and corporations? I'm going to go down a list of some most obvious, most high profile, but this is not a complete list. Mark Zuckerberg, who owns Facebook and Instagram, the CEO of TikTok, ABC News, which is owned by Disney, the Morning Joe show hosts Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski, Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos, and Jeff Bezos also owns the Washington Post, the Los Angeles Times owner, the CEO of Apple, Tim Cook, the CEO of Google, Sundar Pichai, and OpenAI's Sam Altman. You might have heard of the financial conglomerate or the financial giant JP Morgan Chase, Senator Marco Rubio, Coors Beer Company, and along with the maker of Jack Daniels. For car manufacturers, we have Ford, Nissan, and Toyota CEOs, and other transportation corporations including Boeing, Harley-Davidson, and John Deere. And it also includes other places that you may not think about but are under the leadership or ownership of organizations, for example, the National Restaurant Association. But it also might be more obvious, such as McDonald's, the Tractor Supply Company, Stanley Black & Decker, and even Walmart. What are the actions taken, or what can we observe of these behaviors that these persons have made? So we don't want to go off of just hearsay. We want to use science. So what observable evidence do we have as a few examples of public apology and support for Trump? Well, this includes Mark Zuckerberg publicly announcing that he will remove fact-checking from Facebook and Instagram so that whatever Trump says will not be challenged. Microsoft has pledged to invest over $80 million into Trump's global AI infrastructure goals. Jeff Bezos has promised millions to the Trump Inauguration Fund, and he even offered Trump's wife, Melania, a $40 million deal to produce a documentary on her life that he will feature on his cable network Prime Video. We have multiple Silicon Valley figures and companies, and each of them have donated at least $1 million to Trump's inauguration. This includes Elon Musk, who has already given Trump over $250 million just to help him get elected and also to just buy a seat at Trump's table. It also includes others such as Amazon's Jeff Bezos, Meta's Mark Zuckerberg, Apple, Google, and of course TikTok, because they're trying to avoid being sold. News networks have also preemptively engaged in a public apology as well as financial compensation to support their apology to Trump. For example, although the judge repeatedly confirmed that just changing the word or the label of rape to forced sexual act, it does not invalidate the fact that Trump did sexually assault someone. he did force himself sexually upon another individual and multiple individuals. But despite this being an easy win that was possible for ABC News, immediately after it was announced that Trump won, then ABC News paid a $15 million settlement to Trump and, of course, made their host who was saying that make a public apology. There are other ways that people have made a public show of submitting to Trump, and that includes large corporations that announced and already implemented the removal of their DEI programming immediately after he was elected. This includes the Coors Beer Company, Jack Daniels, Ford, Nissan, Toyota, Boeing, Harley-Davidson, John Deere, McDonald's, and of course, Walmart. And it's many of these same companies who publicly distanced themselves and made press conferences and made overhauls to their policies for political promotion and who they were going to promote for any political position. And they made these positions against Trump after he incited the January 6th riot. But now, many of them are promising to remove diversity and other fair practices as a way of apology to him. And in case you are watching this or paying attention to it, it's this rollback of DEI that reveals that if these CEOs really cared about removing unfair hiring and unfair promotion practices, if they really cared about that and were not just worried about being canceled by the public if they did not go against Trump immediately after January 6th, then their rollback of DEI shows that they really would have kept those programs if they believed in it, because they really didn't do it, but it was more for self-preservation, that now they are removing them preemptively before Trump is even in office to satisfy him and again to self-preserve or self-protect and avoid any retaliation from him. Now let's look at politicians, the persons that you elected to serve the needs of your city, town, or state. For the most part, Democrats have not preemptively submitted to Trump, but have instead promised to have a smooth transition of power and to work together. But where you see the biggest examples of politicians radically increasing their support for Trump and engaging in submissive and very obvious compromising behaviors is within the Republican Party. So what has made it so easy for these Republicans to do this? What has made it so easy for them to engage in worship-like behaviors of Trump? Well, the first and strongest factor of influence is Trump. He appears to be very perceptive of opportunities, as well as having a higher than average emotional IQ from a psychological standpoint, not a WebMD version or definition of emotional IQ. And this makes it very easy for him to recognize individuals that he can influence or control. And this is very similar to predatory behavior. So the reason why pedophiles are able to be successful in their perpetrating behavior for so long is because they recognize and identify the children who have the greatest need, and then they exploit that need. So that is similar behavior by recognizing who you can influence or to control. But nonetheless, despite this predatory-like behavior from Trump, the elected officials, specifically the Republicans in Congress, they don't view themselves as victims or as being exploited. Instead, they perceive themselves as benefiting from submitting to Trump. And it's their self-deception that makes them more vulnerable to Trump's dangling fruit or dangling threats to them. And he sees their weakness and their desires, and he recognizes that they are hungry, that they are desperate for ambition or success or money, and that because they are so hungry, that they are willing to compromise to get what they want. And this transaction stimulates both individuals having their psychological ego needs met. It satisfies Trump's ego because he's able to have power to control others, and it feeds the egos of the others by submitting to him because they then feel a sense of empowerment by aligning themselves with power, and they thereby increase their own self-esteem by perceiving themselves as being powerful because they are powerful through association. So if you had I guess going with the little kids examples, you may not be a good fighter, but if you had a big brother, you would say, yeah, but my big brother's going to get you when he comes home from school or comes home from the military. So that's similar to that. So it's the hunger for power and wealth that causes these individuals to compromise. It's also the hunger for power over others that causes them to care more about self-preservation than for protecting those they are called to protect or have been voted in to protect. For example, in this week's Senate confirmation hearing for Pete Hegseth, Senator Ernst is a sexual abuse survivor. Is actually a military sexual abuse survivor. And she knew full well of Hegseth's history of being a perpetrator of sexual assault, his legal charges, out-of-court settlements for sexual assault allegations, and the non-disclosure agreements that victims signed and also his past wives signed about the sexual assault allegations. Yet, Senator Ernst questioned him on the stand or on camera, and she did ask Hegseth, are you willing to protect women in the military as well as men from military sexual assault? And this was one of the reasons, because of her own history of sexual trauma, that she was considered the tiebreaker for Republicans to actually get Hegseth in. So because of her own past military sexual trauma and her very public support of other victims, most individuals, even Republicans, believed that she was going to vote against Hegseth. So then what happened? Interestingly, coincidentally, huge sums of money started coming in for her re-election campaign with the understanding and with the request of her support for Hegseth. So immediately after that Senate confirmation hearing, she publicly announced that she will be indeed voting for Hegseth, which means that she will vote for someone who is a known perpetrator of sexual assault. And why does she compromise her own values and those she has pledged to protect? Because of a need for power. And Ernst likely told herself, now I didn't meet with her, so I don't know, but just looking at consistency in behaviors, then she likely told herself that it's more important for her to be reelected, and so that if she stayed in office, she could help more sexual assault victims than if she was not reelected and was not in Congress. Ultimately, she did give in, and she agreed to vote for a known sexual assailant to become the next leader of the highest military agency in the world. She compromised her values, or rather showed that she values protecting sexual assault survivors less than she values obtaining security in her political position. And this is just the most recent example because Hegseth's confirmation as Secretary of Defense has worldwide implications. That's why we're talking about that today. However, Ernst is not the only politician or person in Congress who has succumbed to Trump's threats as well as his promises. And just like Ernst has been able to ignore the character flaws and threat to others that Hegseth sincerely imposes, many other congressional Republicans believe that they are also doing the right thing. They compromise by saying, oh, I'll make a compromise in this one area for the greater good of me staying in office. So if I believe in myself that I can have more political power to make change the longer I stay in office, then I'm willing to make compromises along the way because I'm focusing on my bigger goals. And with this cognitive construct or core belief, this is how elected officials become blinded by selfish ambition. This is their internal thinking. This is their mindset. And there are also external influences. And this is the external influence of the very real track record of Trump. Because past and recent history has shown the world that Trump is not a person to follow the rules of the law, and that when Trump does break laws, he is never held accountable. This shows those who have self-focused ambition or who have weaker personalities or weaker mentalities that if Trump makes a threat, it's really possible that he can follow through on those threats because he has already shown himself to operate outside of the law and still not be held accountable. And this makes Trump more powerful in the eyes of his allies as well as his foes. And in turn, Trump's power is increased. So when the weaker individuals don't hold him accountable for his actions, and then they also collaborate amongst themselves to support him, then this creation of a power support behind him really then reinforces that he is powerful. So it really increases not only his perception of power, but also his acquisition and maintenance of power. And it's this social reinforcement of power is how the systems, laws, or the processes that would hold the average person accountable for those same acts, this is how they can be and have been altered to help free Trump from being held accountable. And so with individuals who do not have mental fortitude or do not have the personality or the strength, when Trump makes threats, those threats are very likely understood as being very real threats. Similarly, when he offers promises and dangles fruits and benefits for going along with him, voting for him, doing as he desires, such as contracts and re-election support for their own campaigns, then just as easily as his threats can be believed, then so are his promises. In addition to ambition for political power, many members of Congress are blinded by their own goals for financial security, for professional security, and their psychological need for safety, even if that means the exploitation of others. For these individuals who compromise not just for power, but also for wealth, it reveals that they have a poverty mindset and a lack mindset. So you can have a poverty mindset even if you are a trillionaire. It's about your mindset and your beliefs about money that you believe that there is a lack of it, so you do all that you can to desperately get it or hold on to it. So these individuals who do have poverty mindsets or a lack mentality, then they are also more vulnerable to submitting to Trump. And despite the amount of wealth that they have, and despite the amount of power that they have, they still feel very vulnerable to loss or lack. And to avoid this fear of being so vulnerable, then they believe that they must engage in oppressive behaviors that dominate others to keep themselves in power. They doubt their own ability to maintain power and influence if they don't have preferential treatment from someone else who does have, indeed, solidified strong power. And this is also a part of cognitive dissonance, which means that I can psychologically suppress the fact that Trump has committed multiple acts that would be considered illegal or immoral or unfair, but despite that, he has received preferential treatment. But because I know that preferential treatment benefits me also, I'm going to turn a blind eye to Trump's past and his character. This is a subconscious act of cognitive dissonance, meaning that the politician has to psychologically accept and believe that Trump receiving preferential treatment is right and not wrong, so that they can ultimately justify that they themselves receiving preferential treatment from Trump is also a right and not wrong. And they rely on receiving preferential treatment as a way to maintain the power that they doubt they could obtain on their own. They also develop the thought pattern of, well, if I don't maintain this power, then I won't be able to meet my psychological needs or my financial needs. So they eliminate psychological conflict and guilt by choosing to believe that preferential treatment is not wrong, but is necessary for my self-preservation and my family's welfare and security, even if that means other individuals or other families will suffer. And you might even see this type of thinking shown outwardly or manifesting publicly by these same individuals making large or consistent donations to charities or support a law that would not put their congressional seat in jeopardy. For example, they may still vote for bills that protect the right to bear arms, but would then also support a bill or donate to a charity that helps victims of gun violence. So those are examples and explanations of why individual politicians have already compromised and submitted to Trump. But we also have to consider the influence of group behavior. With Maslow's hierarchy of needs, at humans' lowest level of need is our need for consistent food and shelter, as well as the need to belong and to have group security. And to satisfy these basic needs, submissive Republicans and CEOs are more likely than others to become vulnerable to political pressure. And to satisfy these basic needs, lower social ranking Republicans and CEOs, or CEOs and Republicans willing to be submissive, are more likely than others to become vulnerable to political social pressure and Trump's threats. And to meet their social needs and their needs for financial security, they likely will view remaining a member of the Republican Party as more essential than their integrity. And then when you have multiple congressional leaders sharing the same thoughts or the same fears, then this is what promotes a groupthink mentality within a political party. And it's the groupthink mentality that causes the group to reinforce the behaviors of each other. They will internalize within themselves individually and then also promote to the group the belief that compromising is a part of the game and that making deals and trading votes is also a part of the game. So combine all of that. When you have a politician who already has internal thoughts or fears of not having his or her basic needs met and is also willing to compromise to meet those needs, when that is combined with the politician then becoming part of the culture of a social group that reinforces within that group and each other that compromise is necessary for self-preservation and even necessary for the party to survive, then compromising one's values then becomes a normalized behavior and also expected behavior. That compromising and submission are necessary for the greater good. So then the politician will then think, well, this is normal, this is expected, this is what playing politics is, and so I'm just doing that for the greater good that I perceive of me staying in office. So if I have to compromise my values as a way to get a bill passed or to get campaign donations for my reelection or so I can get even more political power, then the compromise is not really a compromise because in the end, I'm winning. And in the end, my greatest fears are avoided and my greatest needs are satisfied. So when you see the CEOs and politicians who are submitting to Trump or compromising their values or beliefs, then it's because they also have at least one of the following vulnerabilities. So they are either not wanting to lose financial security by having to pay taxes or tariffs that Trump has already threatened. They want to secure their freedom by avoiding prison time for crimes they committed or for which they have been investigated under the Biden administration. They fear legal and financial retaliation that Trump promised to anyone that he sees as his enemy. They don't want to lose their position as an industry leader or have their company sold. They don't want to lose their current political power, or they want to gain even more political power and personal power. They fear losing preferential treatment. They fear being rejected by their political social group, or they have social belonging needs and desire acceptance by the Republican Party. They have low self-esteem and desire the approval of a power figure or an authority type or an alpha male personality like Donald Trump or Donald Trump specifically, and they also desire association with him. Or they have committed the same acts, crime, or unfavorable behaviors that Trump has also committed. And therefore, remember, cognitive dissonance, they therefore dismiss his character, criminal history, or extensive fraud history and bankruptcy history. Or, at the very least, they have high levels of self-importance and or high achievement needs combined with a high disregard for the welfare of others, and possibly a higher scoring on narcissism scales. So that's not an exhaustive list, but when you look at the science of behavior, you can predict which personality, which events, which traumas, which pressures in a person's life combined with their history of behaviors, are likely to produce further behavior. So I'm pretty confident that every CEO that you see who has become under the submission of Donald J. Trump has at least one of these areas of weakness. So when these individuals are threatened by Trump, or he promises them something that they want or something that they desire and know that they could never earn on their own without preferential treatment from him or the system that allows individuals like Trump to gain and maintain power, then it's these individuals, these politicians, these CEOs who you see who are so readily submitting to Trump now. And they are willing to not just compromise in their morals or values or past political promises, but they're also willing to publicly humiliate themselves as an act of submission. So, for example, J.D. Vance, during Thanksgiving, he made a meme of him and Donald Trump with Vance being a woman or in a woman's dress, bending over, serving children turkey while Trump stood behind him in the dominant father role. And this was a meme that he made himself and posted. You might even have other senators who have explicitly said during press conferences that if President Donald Trump says jump, we only ask how high. So when you make these acts of public humiliation or public subservience, then it shows not only to Trump, but it signals to others that you are willing to do whatever will please Trump because you do view yourself as lower ranking and you see Trump to be the head and the most alpha, not only in your life, but in the Republican Party and our country and more, maybe even the world. And when you make such bold and very obvious, unwincing statements and displays of submission, that reveals a lot about your perceived strength. It also reveals a lot about how much you are willing to easily compromise to please the person to whom you have acquiesced or submit to. So when you are voting for re-elections for governors or Congress, or even for first-time elections for any elected position, or when you're deciding where to work or where to shop, remember to pay attention to each of the politicians, CEOs, and companies who only a few months ago proclaimed that they care about a democracy or the moral fiber of our society. And remember that if they so easily and so quickly compromise their own values and promises to please just one man or one person, also remember that although they value your vote and your dollar, they value you less than they value their own self-preservation of power and wealth. Well, that ends our time for today. Thank you for listening. Have a happy first month of 2025, regardless of who is in office, regardless of who you did or did not vote for. And when you think about voting for future individuals or how to understand the behaviors of politicians, please help others also understand and help interpret these behaviors by continuing this conversation using the science of psychology and love. Walk the path of life. And if you